This is sort of why I have this confidence that robots will not take all of our jobs, which is AI really enables us to more quickly gather rules or gather data where we were dependent on default rules. And then similarly, once we have new data to work with, we're in charge of making a decision on how to address it.
Welcome to the Joy Powered Workspace podcast, where we help HR and business leaders embrace joy in the workplace. I'm Susan White, owner of Susan Tinder White Consulting, an HR consulting practice. Joining me is my co-host and dear friend, JoDee Curtis, owner of Purple Ink, a large-scale HR consulting firm that I'm an executive collaborator with. Today, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. What do we as business leaders and HR professionals need to be aware of and following as this important technology continues to advance and be integrated into our workplaces? James Atkinson wrote an article in SHRM's HR Quarterly magazine in the winter of 2025 entitled AI's Impact on Talent Strategy. James cited interesting statistics from SHRM's 2024 talent trends about artificial intelligence. JoDee, let's share some of those stats if some of our listeners have not seen that article. Would you like to
Yeah.
start us off?
Yes. Only 1 in 4 organizations use AI to support HR related tasks. I have to believe usage will be skyrocketing year over year until it's universal.
I agree. Of the 25% of organizations that are using AI, 2 out of 3 use it to develop job descriptions. More than 42% use it to customize or target job postings to specific groups. And 2/3 use it to review or screen applicant resumes, communicate with candidates, or automate candidate searches.
Beyond talent acquisitions, some organizations in the SHRM study reported that they are using AI in learning and development by identifying gaps, tracking progress, and pointing to resources.
I know I'm using ChatGPT, which is my platform of choice for now, for a variety of simple tasks. As a HR consultant, when I get requests to create an agenda, I might go to ChatGPT, tell them the things I want to talk about. They put it in beautiful order. Sometimes for job descriptions or job postings, if I really want to spice something up, I will ask ChatGPT to make it more interesting and have more flavor and more excitement. Sometimes I use it to gather thinking on training content, instructional manuals, sample procedures. I might go out and do some research, but I also then let AI see what it can produce. Clients that I work with are using AI in their ATS systems, especially with chatbots, with one-way recorded virtual interviews, etc. How about you, JoDee? With your clients, what are you hearing about AI in HR?
Yeah, well, I know even on our own team, we're using them to assist with resume reviews and recruiting so we can upload resumes to search for certain keywords or key experience. Our applicant tracking system has some basic AI uses in it, but we're doing that in Microsoft Copilot as well too, to put them in there. Some of the other things that you mentioned, like job descriptions and agendas, we're using also. I'm using it constantly in my writing. I
Mm.
will say I do almost everything I write, I'll write it and then I'll put it into Microsoft Copilot to say, make it better, right? Or how else
Yes,
might I say this?
right.
Or, I think we're not using it to write our blogs or to write our podcast scripts. By the way, podcast scripts is another way I've been doing it. And but I like to write it first and then use it to make me sound a little bit smarter or smoother or powerful. I've been using that word in my searches. Some I'll write something and then I'll say, make this more powerful. And I really like it. So,
Yeah, that's terrific. We know
yeah.
we are just scratching the surface of the power of AI in human resources. So, we've invited a guest today to get a broader perspective. The guest we have is Josh Tanenbaum. Josh is the managing partner of Rebalance Capital, a workforce tech and fintech venture capital fund that serves as a trusted source of innovation to HR leaders. One in four globally systemically important institutions and one in 10 Fortune 100 companies. Prior to his career in investing and investment banking at Partners Group and Citi, Josh was a human capital advisor at Korn Ferry, supporting CHROs and their direct reports through mergers and acquisitions, leadership assessments, and talent acquisition. Josh has presented to two White House administrations and served as a judge for the Clinton backed Holt Prize. He holds an MBA from Cornell and a BA from the University of Melbourne.
Oh.
Yes, Melbourne, Australia. Josh, welcome. We are so glad that you're joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Our first question for you is, how are you seeing organizations leverage AI effectively in traditional HR functions?
Sure. So one, when we think about AI, just to have a definition moment for a second, the way we
Sure.
think about it is in two spheres. One is reducing search costs, meaning how do you get information more efficiently, faster. And then two is enabling personalization, which is taking lots of data points, aggregating it, synthesizing it, and ultimately offering a view on what a more personalized experience could be. And so where we see that reflected in sort of the human resources universe is one in performance management in particular. And so you see this in terms of like analyzing performance data and getting red flags, figuring out trends in your workforce. Do you have the right staff in the right places being utilized, and developing real focus plans with that data. And then similarly, this has become, I think, one of the issues now that everybody's sort of playing with AI, which is how do you actually support middle manager readiness? And that is when you have so much more AI tooling, how do you switch on the EQ training for those middle managers to install all of these tools and use them effectively and educate and support it? And so, really, we're seeing AI come up if it's done well in technical fluency, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence. Even that needs to be a philosophy that guides underlying AI models and its utility. And then also just how do you evolve models, having a continuous learning mindset as a manager to make sure these AI tools are effective. And then lastly, I might just highlight recruiting. I think one of the things that always comes up is the historical bias in reviewing a resume. And so we see AI being used in surfacing candidates that have historically not been considered, who have the skills, not the pedigree. We see in the acquisition process, the using AI skill simulations almost to replace that resume to figure out exactly do they have the competencies that they're marketing. And then similarly, there's this sort of synthesis level in the acquisition process where you're looking at a first look at does this person fit or not fit? And then, of course, the ongoing engagement experience in the talent acquisition process. So what that solves from like an outcomes perspective is a time to hire is much lower, but also the optimal hire rate goes much higher. So failure, churn, that are for the wrong reasons reduces.
Terrific.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And what are you seeing AI replacing in HR, and what do you believe it will never replace?
I will give credit to a book that I think is very inspirational called Power and Prediction. And Ajay Agrawal, who's one of the original Gen AI pioneers back in 2012 at the University of Toronto, makes this point about what is a decision. And he breaks down a decision really into two pieces. One is prediction, and the second is judgment. And I think I agree with his articulation that prediction will be replaced, but judgment will not. And this is sort of why I have this confidence that robots will not take all of our jobs, which is AI really enables us to more quickly gather rules or gather data where we were dependent on default rules. And then similarly, once we have new data to work with, we're in charge of making a decision on how to address it. So maybe tactically in the HR community, we just talked about resume screening, right, and scheduling and sort of AI-enabled automation, data entry, administrative tasks, things like that. Um, but then what it can't replace is that human touch. It can't replace culture building. It can't replace ethical decision making, right? Because in and of itself, a decision cannot be made without both prediction and judgment. And so one example that comes to mind, both for cultural reasons as well as for legal reasons, is actually when you fire someone. So you might be able to get from performance data using AI tools who would be the right set of people to include in the risk. But the AI cannot fire that person for you. You need an HR leader who has an orientation to deliver that message, share an understanding as to why, and deliver an experience where as they get offboarded, it's done with a great deal of humanity.
I think we need George Clooney flying all over, right? Was that movie Up in the Air? Yes, that he would go and deliver that bad news. But you're right, it takes that human touch. Yeah, love that,
Yeah,
Josh. Thank you.
nice.
Are there any organizations out there that you think are real leaders in adapting to and integrating AI into their HR functions? And any lessons learned maybe that you're aware of?
Maybe we'll start with the second half of that question, and then
Sure.
let's go to the leaders who are kind of making the best of the situation that we have. So one, the consistent feedback that I get from CHROs is that we're kind of muscling through the AI things. We're saying there's this problem and this tool and that tool, and they're point solutions. And as CHROs, this universe has kind of evolved away from point solutions outside of healthcare and retirement. We need to solve for domain expertise. So it's really absent of the ecosystem. And what big tech firms are trying to create is the systems level technology where AI is at its center, solutions are built around it. And so, in terms of who's doing it well, one thing I actually want to give credit to it is Salesforce. I know we will talk a lot about sort of the job function of an HR leader, but what Salesforce has done really well is actually implementation of AI in governance, figuring out what policies that enable performance thresholds. Thinking about where has AI gone too far, or where does it need to be reeled back, using skills-based models for performance calibration and pathing. I think those are just a couple of really good examples of where Salesforce has implemented AI. And then I also might shout Shopify, which is the online tech-enabled store provider, where they use AI as part of their justification for hiring. And so they embed technology into their decision flows. So that's an example. And then if I were to think about this in between the point solution land and the system levels land, IBM Watson launched Watson Talent, right? And they use it in their own hiring and building to really look at the full firm across the talent architecture to figure out what are the right data points to drive change in an organization.
Ah, terrific.
Nice. Yeah, that's exciting. Who are some of the providers that excite you that our listeners might be aware of?
So when I think about the landscape, the sort of talent acquisition, there's workforce benefits, and then there's ongoing employee engagement outside of benefits. And so on the acquisition side, a company that just announced a really sizable fundraise is Mercor, which has had exceptional revenue numbers in a very short period of time, founded by basically post-school students. And what they do is basically match expert contractors to generative AI jobs. And then they help build the infrastructure layer to do that job matching and sourcing process. That's one that comes to mind. And then second is Infido AI. Infido AI is focused on really enhancing engagement through conversational AI and natural language processing and making the employee voice richer both in its being elevated to management, but also in making those views more actionable.
Yeah.
Um, on the benefit side, this is more the infrastructure side than per se something an HR leader would buy. But Ideon is another interesting company. This firm develops data sets that enable um, plan providers to support HR leaders in healthcare plan matching. You're all probably familiar with the concept of ICRA, which is basically individualized, customized healthcare plans that particularly suits those that are not in sort of the top 15% of the workforce. It allows, at a much lower cost basis, individuals to customize their plans for their life. And I think it's super indicative of where we are in this environment. Workforces have maturely diversified over time. And now we constantly hear this problem from CHROs of one size doesn't fit all in. And so when you have data sets against this earlier theme of personalization, you're able to, at a much lower cost, create much more value for your employees in this healthcare plan matching experience.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a
Nice.
great chance of retention and all the good things that come from that. So that's wonderful. So, what advice would you have to any of our listeners that are considering advocating for the higher usage of AI in HR at their organizations? Any risk mitigation tactics or anything that can help tell the full story to leadership so that they buy in?
If the intention is to get the firm to buy in when they've yet to adapt, it's going to be tied to operational KPIs. It's going to be focused on how can I reduce costs, how can I increase revenue, or support business lines in their needs, or how to improve efficiency. Use the same number of people, but find a lot more efficiency with the people that we have. I think ultimately a CEO or CFO is the ultimate accountability partner that we have to, build ties to. And if we speak their language, this will become a much easier case. Now, the question is, if you have some AI adoption, but you're trying to figure out where you can do more or where you can be more strategic, then I think it's really looking at um, what are the talent gaps that you have? Where is the literacy gaps that you have? And I think if you advocate to train people to say, if we're able to invest in our people to adopt these technologies, this should be the output over the long term. I think that's a worthwhile investment that most leaders will understand. So on the other hand, I think, as I mentioned in the Salesforce example, it is important to also look at where you have to rule things back and say this
Mm.
is what's worked in our experimentation and this is what hasn't. But the question is, to your point about mitigation, how do you build in checkpoints in your process, both from the procurement side and in terms of the actual execution side to monitor your performance in AI? So for starters, when you're doing pilots, start with a really small subset of your employee base and have very specific use cases that you're measuring against. Similarly, look at the underlying server data. Like, where is it being held? Is it on your secure servers or is it on their cloud-based servers? And that in of itself will be a big risk that we have to monitor in this equation. I think once you get past the security layer, then it's really about how do you build in monitoring capabilities? When is agentic AI? What are these robotic voices that are creating things starting to be dangerous? And I think you want to start to look at employee voice if it's internal, to see where you're starting to get negative feedback, and then figure out what needs to be adjusted accordingly. So slow and steady wins the race, and you can take a bottoms up approach in figuring out where to dig in or a top down approach. But no matter what, we have to align in a multi stakeholder voice to make these things possible because it's legal, it's people, it's IT, and it's the CFO.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
advice. Great
Yeah.
advice.
Great advice. Josh, what should we be asking that we don't even know to ask about? Or what else do our listeners need to know?
So I think one of the things that scares me a bit about this technology paradigm is we're talking about it like it's more than just a technology paradigm. we're saying AI this and AI that, but in reality, we're like conflating artificial intelligence, the prediction side, and the automation side. And these are two different things. So I think I want to ask everyone to take one step back and ask the question, what are we solving for? And if we could define an intervention, what would that intervention look like? Don't call it AI, because you might find that AI isn't the only answer. Beyond AI, we're already talking about quantum computing as an example. We're talking about lots of different technology paradigms that are increasingly being adopted that are very much on the frontier. And if we're learning anything about AI, it's that it is the fastest adopted technology paradigm in our history. It took electricity 90 years to get 90% adoption. It's taken, if we take 2012 as the Gen AI introduction, now this is a debatable year to pinpoint, but that's 13 years to get to 65%.
Wow.
And so if we don't think about things as just a bucket, but if we look at things in terms of problems and solutions and defining them in the human experience, I think that will allow us to actually be much more efficient in solving problems. And quite frankly, when you have pressure to implement AI by a stakeholder that doesn't understand what it does, that is a language that helps us ask more questions to get to the root of what we're trying to solve. So
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that's worth thinking about is what is going to be the center of truth of information. Some people use Workday, some people use ADP. If you have lots of different vendors in your lineup, keeping the center of truth becomes a lot harder. So I ask us to think about, where do you want the central point of information to live? And how well can all of your solutions in the HRM universe integrate into that center of truth? And that will help you think about the design of the innovation frameworks that you're working.
Wow, very interesting.
I
So,
do love it. Well, Josh, we ask every guest a joy powered question. And so ours for you is, what's one small step or change you made during your career that boosted your joy at work?
So I think there is an AI answer, and then I'll just give a non-AI answer if that's
And that's
fine too.
perfect.
The AI answer is identifying low value areas of work where AI can be implemented. So you can start to think about the richer things in life. I think that is where you can save time and put your energies elsewhere. It has made my life at work happy. I
Mhm.
would say the non AI answer for what I did in my career was actually um, make a career switch, which is, I'm not telling HR leaders necessarily to leave HR, but ask yourself, have you explored enough of the world to be excited with your life? When
Mm.
you're as a recruiter, once upon a time, what I learned was you can do well in your life on two fronts. One is technical, and the other is functional. You can either have industry expertise or functional expertise. If you're listening to this podcast, it's because you bring really robust, rich HR leadership experience. And if you feel like you love your place and this is the extent of your world and that excites you, that's great. But if you think you can apply HR into a new industry and really develop your intellectual curiosity, stretch your imagination, I think life becomes so much more satisfying both in the work and out.
Mm.
I
Thank you.
love it. I love it. And Josh, how can our listeners reach you if they would like to connect after today?
Thanks for asking. So probably two places. One is LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to interact. And it's just my name, and we're at Rebalance Capital. And then our email is just josh@rebalancecap.com. So there it is up on the air. If you're looking for guidance, happy to have a conversation in terms of how you're adopting AI. But also, if there are companies that you fear are not enterprise grade and don't want to spend like 6 months through an RFP and it be a waste of time in the end, feel free to just send over the company to us, and we're happy to take a look for you and give you a big write up.
Yeah,
Terrific.
nice.
Terrific. Well, thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Josh. I've learned a lot and I've so enjoyed having you
Me
on the
too.
show.
Yeah.
Likewise, Susan, JoDee, thanks so much for having me, and congratulations on this great work. Amazing that people get SHRM credits for this, and kudos to you for being the center of expertise that people gravitate around.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You may be wondering, how do I learn more about artificial intelligence, especially on what you may want to bring into your organizations that could enhance your people management? SHRM offers a specialty credential called AI plus HI specialty credential that our listeners may want to check out. In this program, participants identify and analyze potential uses of AI in recruitment, talent management, performance management, learning and development, and employee engagement. JoDee, I think you've taken a portion of this specialty credential, haven't you?
Yes, I took the course itself and it was fantastic. I have to admit, I felt like I was maybe a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of my knowledge around AI. After the first class, I'd say I moved down to like a 2 or 3.
Oh no. When you realize
Only
what you don't know.
Yes, there was so much I didn't know, but I am trying to almost every day implement more and more of the things I've learned on there. So
Ah, that is terrific.
it's a very good course. So,
We will put a link to the specialty credential that SHRM offers
yeah,
in our show notes.
yeah. On to our listener question. Susan, our listener asks, how do you respectfully cut an interview short when you learn early on that is not a good fit? By the way, I love this question.
You found yourself in many an interview, I bet, where you're thinking, oh
Yes,
no, this is
yes.
not going to be somebody we hire. Well, I'll tell you, I am uncomfortable cutting an interview short. Given the candidate has likely prepared for it, they probably did a little worrying about it, fretting. I'm guessing they dressed up. They took time away from other work or life commitments that they have. And then if it was an in person interview, they certainly probably drove there or got public transportation there, somehow commuted to see you to spend what they thought in their minds was going to be maybe 30 to 40 minutes with you. I really do believe that that individual sitting across from you, even if it's virtual, they deserve your attention for at least 25, 30 minutes. You may want to check yourself when you're having that thought, oh my gosh, this is not the person. Maybe you're having a first impression bias in play. Maybe there's something that person said or did, or they looked a certain way, or there's something that's causing you to judge. And then my recommendation would be to take a breath, realize you've already carved out the time. Let's show this person respect. If there's any biases that I think are surfacing here, why don't I like this person? Set it aside for the moment and listen. Take that time, truly actively be present, physically, emotionally, mentally. And at the end of 25 minutes or so, you certainly can take the time to thank him for coming in. If you feel really confident in your decision, go ahead and tell them then that you don't think it's going to be a fit on your end and why. Well, that's very, very courteous. Now, you may not know that, or that may not be your protocol. You might want to decide that after the person's gone, you're going to, in a few days, send them a decline email or whatever your practice is. But I just feel like cutting an interview short isn't the right thing to do. JoDee, I'd love your opinion. You may have very different perspective on this.
Susan, I would say I'm have been somewhere in between. I am such an efficiency person. My maximizer strengths wants me to always be bring out the best of a situation or process. And so I don't like to waste the candidate's time either, but I do believe everything you said about, they've spent time preparing and it should be worth me learning more about them. I try and even think, might there be something else that this person could be a fit for? So maybe they're not for this role. But I'll tell you, I spent many years just trying to create conversation with people who I knew or I felt like we're not going to be a great fit. But now, I think if there is something very obvious that I know they're not going to be a fit, I'll just tell them and I'll just tell them why.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that and respect it. And before the person leaves, let them know. Don't go home
Yeah.
with hope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
when
And
you
just
know.
drag it out for them too.
Yeah, that's
So,
fair. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So, Jody, it's time for In the News, a 2025 State of the Workplace Workforce Trends and Productivity Benchmarks report that was released March 11th, 2025 by the Active Track Productivity Lab says the average workday in the United States is now 8 hours and 44 minutes, which is 36 minutes shorter than it was prior to 2022.
Very interesting.
I know. They followed over 218,900 employees in 777 companies between January 1st, 2022 and December 18th, 2024. Another interesting finding is that 58% of employees in this study use AI tools in their work in some way, shape, or form. The length of the average workday is going down as the use of AI in the workplace is going up. That does kind of make sense to me.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it is a good news story for us as we're seeing that AI may well be making us more efficient and relieving us of some time consuming work tasks that often kept us at our desks or machines at clock out times.
Yeah.
During my corporate years of working in a large organization, I always worked more than 8 hours. I would say I tried to think I probably work at least 9 hours a day, then sometimes on the weekend go in and go out, but I always thought I was abnormal because I was, like, worried and I was fretting and wanted to make sure everything was done, but it startles me when I see this stat that the average work hours in 2025 is 8 hours and 44 minutes a day, but maybe because people are connected all the time, that they
Yeah.
are working, even though we think they're at home or it's, uh, evening and they've got the kids to bed, maybe folks are working. So, it
Yeah.
surprises me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that my hours are keeping that average up higher.
Oh,
So
no. You're always
I'm
working, I know.
I'm not always proud of that,
Good.
but
Oh,
I'm not helping the average. Let's just say that. So, yeah.
please tune in next time and make it a joy powered day. If you're SHRM certified, you can get credit for listening to this podcast. To get the code, go to joypowered.com/SHRM and fill out a short evaluation. When you finish the evaluation, you'll get the code and a link to a proof of participation certificate. The code will expire May 5th, 2026. Again, that's joypowered.com/SHRM to get the code, and it's going to expire on May 5th, 2026. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your dedication to the HR profession.
If you like our show, you should check out our Patreon page. We have 3 monthly membership tiers where you can get perks like early and ad free access to episodes, video recordings of the episodes, and top action items and bonus episodes. And if you want to try it out first, you can sign up for a 7-day free trial. You'll get access to past content when you join. So even if we don't post anything new, during that trial period, you can still get a taste of the perks members get. If you're not ready to sign up for a membership, but you want some of the perks, head over to the shop page on our Patreon. That's where you can purchase individual episode video recordings, ad-free audio, and bonus episodes. You can find all this great stuff at patreon.com/joypowered. That's patreon.com/joypowered. Thanks for listening today and supporting our show, and make it a joy powered day.
Thank you. If you like the show, please tell a few friends about us and let us know what you thought by leaving us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. Become a Joy Powered member to get extras like early access to episodes, video versions of the episodes, bonus episodes, and even more. Learn more at patreon.com/joypowered. patreon.com/joypowered. You spell Patreon, Patreon. So it's patreon.com/joypowered. You can find more information on our podcast, books, blogs, and more at getjoypowered.com. We're at JoyPowered on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can email us via joypowered@gmail.com. Make it a joy-powered day.